At the end of the day, the whole idea of this course is, what do you need? What are you doing to take care of yourself? How are you paying attention to the stressors so that you can use it as grist for the mill? If you're so busy doing so many things, you're not going to be able to do that.
Welcome to the NWI podcast, brought to you by the National Wellness Institute. I'm your host, Caroline Carlson, and this is the podcast for wellness professionals and enthusiasts who want to amplify the quality of their lives in all 6 dimensions of wellness. Don't worry about taking notes. I'll do that for you. And you can find them at nwipodcast.org. This episode is brought to you by NWI's Worksite Wellness Specialist Program. NWI's Worksite Wellness Specialist Program is a premier training program for worksite wellness, human resources, benefits, and interdisciplinary professionals. Earn your Worksite Wellness Specialist Certificate this January in Florida at the pre-conference for the Health Benefits Conference and Expo. This year's HBCE conference is in beautiful Clearwater Beach, Florida at the Sheraton Sand Key Resort. Get the knowledge, skills, and tools you need to create and sustain a culture of wellness within your organization. Continuing education credits for this certificate will be administered by the National Wellness Institute. Go to nationalwellness.org/HBCE pre-conference to get more information and register. That's nationalwellness.org/HBCE pre-conference. Welcome to Part 1 of our interview with Dr. Joel Bennett about the 2 new Train the Trainer certificate courses offered in collaboration between the National Wellness Institute and Organizational Wellness and Learning Systems. Our interview went over an hour in length, so I've broken it into 2 parts for listening convenience. Both parts are available now at nwipodcast.org and iTunes. In Part 1, we discuss what the new Train the Trainer certificate courses are and who will benefit most by taking them. We also discuss the concepts and the book behind the Resilience and Thriving, The Secret Power of Stress course, open for registration now at nationalwellness.org/resilience. Joel Bennett PhD is president of Organizational Wellness and Learning Systems, OWLS, a consulting firm that specializes in evidence-based wellness and e-learning technologies to promote organizational health and employee well-being. Dr. Bennett's programs have since reached close to 100,000 workers across the United States and abroad. His programs have been recognized by the U.S. Department of Health and the Surgeon General as effective in reducing employee behavioral risks. Clients who have used OWLS tools or consulting services include Southwest Airlines, Caterpillar Corporation, TGI Friday Restaurants, Wyndham International Hotels, Wellness Councils of America, WellCOA, and many others, including health and nonprofit community agencies. Dr. Bennett has authored over 20 peer-reviewed scientific articles, as well as 5 books, including Raw Coping Power, Wellbeing Champions, Time and Intimacy, Heart-Centered Leadership, and Preventing Workplace Substance Abuse. The new Train the Trainer certificate courses launched in collaboration between NWI and OWLS currently offers 2 certificate courses. The Resilience and Thriving, The Secret Power of Stress course is open now for registration at nationalwellness.org/resilience. Registration for the Health Consciousness Prescription Drugs, the Wellness Alternative course opens on January 19th, 2018. Dr. Bennett, welcome to the podcast. It is great to see you again. We are here to talk about your new Train the Trainer series of courses that you have launched through your company, Organizational Wellness and Learning Systems, in collaboration with the National Wellness Institute.
Yes, it's very exciting because National Wellness Institute brings so much depth and specifically models that we're going to be integrating into the training. So anybody who's a National Wellness Institute person or is interested in becoming certified in other areas of wellness, a lot of what we're going to be doing will map onto other things that NWI is doing.
Wonderful. Well, I know in particular we're going to be talking about the course Resilience and Thriving, The Secret Power of Stress, open now for registration. But before we delve into the course, please tell us about your new Train the Trainer series of courses. What is a Train the Trainer course?
So great. Yeah, a Train the Trainer course is a course that's designed to give individuals who receive the training the ability to go ahead and then train others in the same training. So in train to trainer systems, there are 3 levels. There's direct training, where I train you and you receive it and you just use it personally. That's the first level. The next level is I train you to do the same of what I just did. It is I train you to go ahead and train to deliver that program to somebody else. And then they receive it personally. That's what we're doing. But there's a third level, which is what we call a master level training of trainers, which is not what we're doing, which is training others to train others to deliver it, right? So in a sense, I would be the master level trainer of trainers. And the people who I'll be training will be trained by me to deliver the training personally to others. That's what a training of trainers is.
I see. So who would benefit most from taking a Train the Trainer course?
Well, in the area of health promotion or well-being or wellness, there are different occupations or different approaches. There's people who work in the workplace, and we often think, when we think about training, we usually think about training and development or organizational development. And so there we're talking about people who are in the work setting who can then go ahead and do these courses with a group of individuals, other employees or people who are coming to them through the workplace to receive the training. The fact is, though, that because this is health promotion material, there are other types of practitioners or students who work outside of the workplace. And those could be people who are in coaching, wellness coaching. Okay. A lot of the tools that we're going to be doing and reviewing in the course are tools that people can use as part of their coaching practice. Also, there may be people who are champions in a work setting or in a healthcare setting, nurses who have been assigned to do health promotion wellness committee work, who may not be a trainer per se. Those individuals as well can use these tools inside the context of their work groups or as part of their role as a champion, even though they may not be a trainer per se. So the materials, while they're called trainer materials, they're actually materials that can be used for anybody who's working in a health promotion type of position.
That's wonderful. So it's really versatile in its application.
That's the goal. Yeah, people have used these tools in all of those different contexts I've just described.
Excellent. Now, I know these courses are evidence-based. So what does that mean?
So the modules that I'll be providing, the Resilience to Thriving course and the Health Consciousness Prescription Drug course, those courses have been originally developed, designed, and then delivered and also tested in research studies. The Stress Resilience Thriving course originally was called Stress Problem Solving in You, and it was one of the modules in a broader program called Team Awareness. Okay. And Team Awareness and also another program called Team Resilience. Those programs are in the National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs and Practices, and they have been acknowledged by the United States Surgeon General as effective in reducing employee behavioral risks. So there's research, published peer-reviewed research on those trainings. Then the health consciousness one similarly is derived directly from those modules, and we've published papers on that as well, and we have another one that's in press. So all of the material that people are going to be getting have been originally designed, developed, and delivered and tested in a research study and in some cases clinical trials. That's what evidence-based in our language means. It's been tested in a research trial, preferably a randomized clinical trial, and that's what we've done with some of these.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes it really clear. That's really good. Before we get into content, can you tell me about the format of the courses? How are they structured? I see you've got 2 sessions plus some preparatory material.
Yes. So in my experience, and I've done a lot of these training of trainers, the most effective method is a three-phased method. One is preparation. Second is in a what I call an immersion. And then a third is a review of logistics. So the first phase is preparation. We'll be providing a video and some materials to help all the people who are coming to the course prepare and read and get a full understanding of the structure of the course. And that includes for Raw Coping Power, we have our book, Raw Coping Power, that, well, I call it Raw Coping Power, but it's Stress, Resilience, and Thriving. We'll be talking about that in a minute. So that book is part of the training.
I love that book.
Great. Well, we're going to be talking about it, right?
Yes.
In a little bit. Great. So the second part is the immersion part. That is, I ask everyone to experience the training firsthand, to experience what it's like to go through the program as a participant, and to experience the thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and perceptions that somebody who's receiving this would go through as a trainee, if you will, or as a participant, or as a client. It's very important to go, because the material is about personal transformation, because the material is about one's own mind and one's own emotions, it's very important for trainers to experience it firsthand. Moreover, as you know from the Raw Coping Power book, which is for the stress course, our story is very important when it comes to resilience and thriving. And so a trainer who's going to be effective needs to own their own story around their own raw coping power. How did they deal with hardship in their life? How did they deal with adversity in their life? So the immersion part, the second part of a trainer, is to really take the time to experience the training firsthand and apply it to oneself. The third part is, that's another session, which we completely do at another time, is we then go back through and step-by-step review all of the elements of the program. There's a assessment tool that's used, pre and post assessment tool. There are slides, there are facilitator notes, there are handouts, there's supplementary material. So there's a lot of, if you want to say, logistics or materials. So the Training of Trainers course is divided up into those three basic segments for both courses that we're going to be doing.
That's very thorough. That's excellent. And now I know that you're integrating your content with two fundamental elements of the National Wellness Institute, the 6 dimensions of wellness and the competencies. Can you please explain more about these two elements?
Oh, yeah. And it's real exciting. And I want to talk with you more about that map that we're creating for the resilience course and the stress, evaluate, cope, resilience, evolve, thriving map, right? So what we're doing is taking the 6 dimensions of the National Wellness Institute, physical health, emotional health, intellectual, occupational, spiritual, social, of course. And what we're doing is we're driving the course content around those dimensions. So what does stress, for example, look like in each of those dimensions? What does resilience look like in each of those dimensions? What does thriving look like in each of those dimensions? And this past summer, I did the keynote for National Wellness Institute conference on the audacity of wholeness. And in that keynote, we can give a link to the blog that we wrote on it. We talk about how human beings are whole beings, and these dimensions are part and parcel of what makes up an integrated human being. And you cannot do wellness in just one area. You cannot be healthy in just physical if you're going to pursue this path of wholeness or well-being. So what we're doing is we're using that basic idea and applying it to the concepts of stress and also to the concept of health consciousness in these two courses. So it is very exciting to have that as a very intuitive, very easy to understand model.
Yes.
And also to help people identify, is there stress in their life in a particular area? Or which areas do they need to thrive in more? So many people might be very good at physical. We often talk about that in wellness more than the other areas. But what's happening in their spiritual well-being? And what are they doing to address whatever stressors there might be spiritually? So that's the basic idea.
That's a good example, because a lot of times people tend to put off or more easily overlook the less visible areas of their lives. So if it's physical, that's their face forward to the world, but it's easier for them to put off taking time to do the inner work on their spirituality.
Yes. And at the same time, many people experience stress in the work setting, occupationally.
Yes.
And they don't do anything about that. They think that if I manage my life in these other areas, it'll take care of the work stress. So what we talk about in this training specifically, actually both trainings, is how do you modify stressors at work? How do you manage, not just manage, but learn how to embrace those stressors and transform them? So we can go into a lot of depth. And so this is the idea. That's what's great about this, is it's a training, but it opens up a whole set of tools and perspectives that people can take into their work.
Wonderful. Now, you are an NWI sponsored speaker on January 24th for the Health Benefit Conference and Expo, the HBCE. And the title of your talk is
When Wellness Hits the Wall.
Yes.
Yeah. So before, but I wanted to, you had asked in your previous question, before we go there are two different things that we're taking from NWI. One is the 6 dimensions, and the other one are the new competencies.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that we don't forget that this past year, National Wellness Institute came out with a set of competencies for wellness practitioners in general. And so there's contextual competencies, there's methodological competencies, there's systems competencies. All of this we can give people links to, right?
Yes.
We can give. So I just want to make sure that people know that there's a lot that we're not just doing in terms of content, in terms of the 6 dimensions, but what does it mean to be competent as a wellness practitioner? So both courses are not just about content, but also about getting a better handle on what it means to be competent. Let me just give you one example. The systems aspect competency in the national wellness model is this idea of being able to apply relevant theories and models to explain the integrated role of these different dimensions, physical, social, spiritual, and so forth, in the human pursuit of wellness and the human pursuit of the experience of wellness. So this idea of applying relevant theories and models is a competency. That is, a good wellness practitioner needs to know theories and models so that they're not just speaking off the cuff about things or doing practices out of thin air. In fact, the research shows that the most effective programs are based in theory. So in both courses have a theoretical basis. So in that way, every time we train a particular tool in the courses, we're going to say, hey, hold on a second. Note, this is an example of that competency. So that's what's new here as well, that we're not just delivering the course in a vacuum. We're talking about your own development as a wellness practitioner along these different competency dimensions.
It's very dynamic. You're really coming at it from 360 degrees.
Yeah, because we want the people who are going through the training to not just learn the content, but to learn what it means to develop themselves as a competent wellness practitioner. That's what national wellness is about. It's not only about, we have so many different types of course content that we deliver at National Wellness Institute. Now with the competency model, it's like, okay, it's not just about the content, but am I being understanding of the importance of theory, for example, or am I understanding the importance of taking a methodological approach? So that's the idea. Yeah. 360. We're good.
We're good. So in talking specifically about your Resilience to Thriving, the Secret Power of Stress course, How did this particular course come into being?
Well, it's interesting, kind of tying back into the sponsored talk for the HBCE conference. My original coming into the field of wellness was not through wellness, but was through mental health and substance abuse. And specifically in 1994, I was hired by the Institute of Behavioral Research as a research scientist to design a training program to prevent worker substance abuse, both alcohol and illicit drugs, and even further along prescription drugs, which we'll be talking about. And when I did the research, I was given 2 large data sets of employees that looked at what are the risk factors and the protective factors for their use of alcohol and drugs. And I also was becoming familiar with the literature on employee substance abuse out of the Smithers Institute and Cornell, work that had been done for a number of years from the employee assistance field. And it was clear that stress was a significant risk factor, that you cannot, for working adults, provide a prevention program without giving them some skills on how to address the stressors that cause them to misuse alcohol and use drugs. So what we did was we reviewed the literature at the time and found that cognitive behavioral approaches to stress management tended to be the most effective. So we inserted into our training a module called Stress, Problem Solving, and You. And then from 1998 to 2008, 10 years, we delivered that program in various contexts, and I trained other people to deliver it. Then I had the opportunity to work with the National Guard, and they brought me in to help them develop their program. This was right during the Iraq-Afghan conflict and afterwards. And what I learned was that stress, problem solving, and you was not necessarily how they saw it. It's a very military trauma, and alcohol use in the military is a very different phenomena, and we don't have time to go into it. But what I did recognize is that they had this incredible ability to cope with immense problems, and it was very deep in them. And I had also been listening to some tapes on this technique called EMDR, which is a methodology for dealing with trauma, eye movement desensitization, which is used by clinical psychologists. And what happened was I started to realize that what's really going on here is that there's this very deep, innate genetic drive to transform stress. That it wasn't just about problem solving, but it was about actually making stress something that was a key to growth and what's now been called post-traumatic growth and resilience and so on. So we called it raw coping power. And instead, and I go into that in the book. So the training became raw coping power. Now it's evolving more, and it keeps evolving in different ways for different clients to be more systematic, so that it applies to the 6 dimensions and to the competencies that we talked about. So I hope that answers the question. It's probably a lot more detail and depth than needed, but
no, it does answer the question very well. So is that what you mean when you say in your book that not all stress is bad stress?
Yeah, I would say, as we talk about in the map, there's trauma, there's adversity, there's hardship, there's stressors that occur, and then there are hassles, right? So you have the level of intensity. So we actually try to avoid the use of bad stress versus good stress.
Okay.
That you'll see that there are a number of books that are coming out. I mean, it's amazing how many people are writing about this topic. So all stress, even the trauma, has the opportunity to be transformed, right?
Yes.
It's this idea, everything is grist for the mill.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're not doing a clinical psychology course, there are elements of what we're doing, especially since we did work with the National Guard and military, that can help people to recognize their limits in dealing with something that might have a basis in trauma. So if we go at the very severe end, right? So for example, one of the tools in the book and one of the main themes in the course is the importance of reaching out for help and for getting help. In fact, one of the evidence-based outcomes of our programs is we reduce stigma for seeking help.
Yes.
That's something that, if you do this right, is a fairly reliable outcome. You improve people's chances of reaching out for help, whether it's from a professional mental health person or a pastor, or going to a support group, or going to a wellness coach. So the idea here is that this is a primary prevention program. It's not an intervention program. It's a primary prevention program. And from that perspective, stress is something we all experience all the time. It's a question of how do we prevent the stress from becoming more than it needs to be for us? And how can we transform the stress into something that's more positive for us? So I would argue that all stress is fundamentally an opportunity for good. That doesn't mean that there's trauma that needs to be addressed. So I would put that, if you want to, more on the bad end.
So we're not really talking about preventing stress itself. It sounds like we're talking about learning to gauge our stress levels and embracing stress as a catalyst for growth.
Yeah, in fact, we talk in the literature about the difference between stressor, the stressor, the thing that is stressing us, and then the strain that results from the stressor. Stressors are going to happen. We are going to experience stress, the stressor, if you will. It's where, to your point, we can prevent the impact that it has on us, or modify or modulate, or even better, move it through to resilience and to thriving, right? That's the whole purpose of the course. So.
Map the course.
Yeah.
So is this tying into what you say for us? To keep moving in life, we have to always be a little bit off course to keep moving forward?
Yeah, that's interesting. Tell me your own thoughts about that. To be a little bit off course to keep moving forward. What are you thinking?
It makes me think of inertia, and that in order to keep being propelled, we can't get so comfortable and complacent that we're just in stasis and we just never progress. We get stuck where we are without even perhaps realizing it.
Right. So you're saying that to keep moving, we're never moving in a straight line? Tell me, you were always, that's
I think
true.
You could fall asleep if you were always moving in a straight line.
Well, the analogy is, and it's been used in many different contexts, that a guided missile, right, or an airplane, or anything that's moving through a system like that is never directly on course. It's never on a straight line. That it's always making adjustments. It veers a little bit here and it comes back. It veers a little bit here, it goes back. In fact, I was recently on an international flight, and you can watch the monitor and see where the plane is going up or down and so forth. And you can see it's constantly going up and down and up and down. It's never directly on point. And so that's the whole idea of our internal guidance system. And so in raw coping power is that energy that allows us to find that compass. That's the idea here. It's the energy behind what allows us to come up with an alternative if we get veered off this way.
I believe you called that in your book the ability to recalibrate in the face of adversity.
Yeah, that's it.
Is that what that is? Okay.
Yeah, recalibrate.
So it's common to hear about work-life balance. What are, as you call them, work-life borders?
Oh, yeah. We're actually going to be doing a workshop at NWI this summer.
Lucky me.
That. Yeah. So There's actually a theory called work-life border theory. You could Google Scholar it. And we learned that there's this idea that there are lots of myths around work-life balance, which we don't have time to go into, but it basically perpetuates this idea that we can balance it all, we can have it all.
Yeah, the biggest myth is that it's possible.
It doesn't really serve anybody.
Right.
So we instead use border theory, and we look at the different dimensions of life. We're more like the domain. So there's work, for example, there's family, there's friends, there's hobbies if you have the time, there's entertainment, there's different spheres of life. If we did this with emerging adults, young restaurant workers, and they had sometimes job, they had school, they had boyfriend or girlfriend, they had parents. So there's different domains that we all have in our life. Borders are the lines, if you will, between those different areas. And sometimes those borders are strict, and sometimes they're permeable, right? So if you work at home, it's very permeable, your borders. There's less distinction between work and home because you're working at home.
Right.
So the idea of borders, and that's a tool in the book, is how do you take the time to pause in the border zone between these different domains? That a core part of this ability to transform stress requires pausing, requires stopping and reflecting. And taking time out. There's a lot of talk these days about stress in sleep and fatigue management. And a lot of it is because we've bought the Kool-Aid is that we have to keep going. We have to keep moving. We have to move, and do, and move, and do.
Multitask.
Well, yeah, so that's more like balancing. Got to keep balancing. Instead, we provide this whole framework for stress, evaluate, cope. SEC, take a sec, understand what's going on. And to do that, it requires, where can I take time out? So many people do it if they're driving on their way home from work, right? They'll turn on the radio, or they'll stop off and go for a walk, or they'll make dinner and take a few minutes before dinner is served. So these pauses, these cracks in the world, if you will, are what we mean by border, and they're part and parcel of living a healthy life.
That's interesting because you had mentioned in the book how many people still abide by multitasking, and that it is important to learn to slow down and pay attention. Can you talk about that a little bit and how people can get back to that in their lives in the midst of this myth that multitasking is so helpful?
So a lot of people are talking about mindfulness and the use of mindfulness and being present in the moment and being with whatever is going on. So we have to learn to just sense when we're rushing when we don't need to rush. We need to sense when we are doing more when we can do less. It's developing that internal capacity to stay in tune with oneself. And there's so much out there now. There's the work on self-compassion, there's mindfulness, there's acceptance and commitment therapy. There's all these different tools that are designed to help us to do that. So I think for those who are multitaskers in the audience, right? It's really looking at, are you really needing to do it? On the other hand, are you potentially in a work addiction? So there's tools for that as well. There are lots of companies that foster a workaholic norm. And so we have to pay attention, again, to what's going on for us. At the end of the day, the whole idea of this course is, what do you need? What are you doing to take care of yourself? How are you paying attention to the stressors so that you can use it as grist for the mill? If you're so busy doing so many things, you're not going to be able to do that.
This concludes part 1 of our interview with Dr. Joel Bennett. Don't forget, part 2 is available now at nwipodcast.org and iTunes. Registration for the 2018 National Wellness Conference is now open. Early bird rates expire February 16, 2018. So register today at nationalwellness.org/NWC. Like what you hear? Please leave us a rating on iTunes and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'll see you on the next episode. Be well.